Have you ever seen a car so beautiful, so ahead of its time, that you wondered how it could possibly have failed in sales? Today we're going to dive into the stories of some of the most impressive, most elegant, and at the same time, most unfairly forgotten American classics ever built. Models that had everything: style, charm, engineering, but were buried by the market, by circumstances, or simply by bad luck. This is a story of beauty, ambition, and pure automotive injustice. Now buckle up. We're about to rescue the most stunning classics the world forgot. 1955 to 57 Ford Thunderbird. The moment you look at it, its long silhouette, its powerful front end, that almost theatrical 1950s elegance, it's easy to believe you're standing before one of the greatest triumphs of American automotive design. And yet, behind that flawless presence lies a story shaped by risky decisions, unmet expectations, and a destiny that simply did not do justice to its beauty. This Thunderbird didn't fail because it lacked appeal. It failed because its appeal no longer aligned with what people expected it to be. The first generation had won over the public with a very clear mission: a small, sporty, agile, emotional two-seater designed to burn asphalt with style. But Ford, convinced it could expand the market, transformed the Thunderbird into a bigger, heavier, comfort-oriented coupe. In that transition, it lost the lightness that defined its soul and drifted away from the audience that had turned it into a cultural icon. What was meant to be a natural evolution became a shift in identity that confused buyers. It wasn't sporty enough to compete with the Europeans, yet not luxurious enough to stand against the high-end American cruisers dominating the decade. Context plays a decisive role too. In the late 1950s, American buyers were looking for experiences, emotion, excitement, not just visual elegance. And while this generation of Thunderbird was undeniably harmonious to the eyes, its driving feel told another story. Owners often said that although the V8 delivered respectable power, the throttle response lacked the spark its styling promised. It was a car built to glide smoothly down the highway, not to raise your heartbeat. Today, depending on condition and the quality of restoration, a well-preserved example can surpass $45,000, while meticulously restored units can reach far higher numbers. 1957 to 58 Cadillac Eldorado Brougham. Many experts consider it the most beautiful and luxurious Cadillac of the entire decade. An automobile created to push American engineering and craftsmanship to a level no one had ever dared attempt. But that same ambition, taken to the extreme, ended up turning it into one of the biggest commercial failures of its era, a paradox that makes its story even more fascinating today. The philosophy behind the Eldorado Brougham came down to a single idea: build the ultimate American automobile, an unmistakable symbol of status, refinement, and technological superiority. Cadillac removed every limitation. No budget restrictions, no shortcuts, no compromises. Each unit was assembled almost entirely by hand, with an attention to detail that bordered on obsession. But perfection like that came at a price so high, the market simply refused to accept it. The Eldorado Brougham cost more than a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, something unthinkable for many buyers at the time. To them, European luxury was still the supreme reference, and no American manufacturer, no matter how ambitious, could justify such an extravagant price tag. Cadillac wanted to prove that the United States could outshine any brand from the old world. The public disagreed. The result? Only 704 units produced over 2 years. Over time, stories emerged confirming that its cutting-edge technology also brought headaches. The air suspension system, one of its proudest innovations, was prone to failure, and the maintenance costs were as shocking as the original sticker price. The Eldorado Brougham was, in many ways, too sophisticated for the real world, a jewel whose brilliance exceeded the practical limits of its time, and perhaps that's exactly why it captivates collectors today. Everything that doomed it back then has become irresistible now. A well-preserved example easily exceeds $150,000, and fully restored units reach much higher numbers. 1957 Chrysler 300C. This was a car that radiated presence, authority, and a visual confidence few models of its era could match. Every line of its design signaled a perfect balance of elegance and power. as if it had been created to dominate any highway it touched. Yet the irony of its story is that, despite being one of the most impressive American cars of its time, it ended up as one of the greatest victims of circumstances that had nothing to do with its engineering excellence. Under the hood lived a 392 cubic inch Hemi 5.8, a powerhouse capable of outperforming many American competitors. For countless drivers, taking the wheel of a 300C was experiencing the peak of mid-century American automotive engineering firsthand. But fate dealt it a cruel hand. During those years, Chrysler was going through a turbulent period marked by widespread quality control issues that deeply damaged the company's reputation. Even though the 300C was an outstanding machine, many buyers had lost trust in the brand and avoided its vehicles altogether, without even analyzing their true merits. The problem wasn't the car, it was the badge on the grille. This negative perception suffocated its sales and turned the 300C into a textbook example of how a remarkable car can be unfairly overshadowed by mistakes it never made. There's another layer to this story. Engineers and experts of the era often claimed the 300C was not only one of the most powerful American cars available, but also one of the smoothest, most stable, and most precise to drive. Today in the collector's market, a well-preserved 300C can exceed $70,000, and carefully restored examples reach much higher figures. Before we move on, let me ask you something directly. Among all the forgotten American models of the 1950s, which one do you believe deserved far more recognition than it ever received? Tell me in the comments. 1962 to 63 Studebaker Avanti. The story of its creation is infused with a sense of almost desperate reinvention. Studebaker, a company with a long but increasingly fragile history, was fighting to regain prestige and prove it could still compete with Detroit's giants. To do that, they called on Raymond Loewy and his small, tightly focused design team, who worked under a frantic, almost heroic pace to shape a car capable of redefining the brand's identity. The decision to use fiberglass for the body, something rarely seen in American luxury cars, allowed for lines that were impossible to achieve with conventional steel, giving the Avanti a futuristic character that made it stand out instantly. Yet despite its bold styling and technical innovation, the Avanti was born into an unsustainable corporate environment. Studebaker was drowning in financial problems, production delays, and a factory infrastructure that simply couldn't keep up with the initial demand. Even though the public showed great interest, the long waiting times led to frustration and mass cancellations. The Avanti didn't fail because of poor quality or lack of vision. It failed because the company behind it was collapsing. There's a particularly revealing fact. During high-speed tests at Bonneville, Avantis equipped with tuned engines reached speeds over 170 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest American cars of its era. Its potential was enormous, and its design exceptional. But all of this was overshadowed by Studebaker's inevitable downfall. When the company shut down its main plant, the Avanti disappeared with it, almost as if they shared the same doomed fate. Today, the Avanti is prized as a singular and highly valuable collectible. A well-preserved example can exceed $80,000, while the more powerful versions can reach significantly higher prices. 1971 to 73 Buick Riviera Boattail. Its design is a blend of boldness and romanticism, a modern reinterpretation of 1960s aesthetics taken to the extreme at the dawn of the 1970s. One look at its boat-inspired rear end is enough to understand that this was a car built to defy conventions and provoke strong reactions. The story of the Boattail is a fascinating example of how brilliance can turn into risk. Buick's designers wanted to break away from the predictability that had taken hold of much of the American auto industry. They aimed to create a car that combined muscular proportions, a sharp waistline, and a sweeping rear profile reminiscent of European fastbacks and the custom cars that defined 1960s automotive culture. The result was a body that looked like it was already moving even when parked, one that invited the imagination to wander toward endless highways and orange-colored sunsets. It was a car that expressed emotion simply by existing. But that visual power wasn't enough to win over the average buyer. The Boattail arrived in a market growing increasingly conservative, shaped by economic tension, an approaching oil crisis, and a rising preference for more understated designs. Many buyers saw it as too bold, almost excessive, and its sales dropped sharply. What we celebrate today as an iconic design was, in its time, viewed as a stylistic gamble that strayed too far from the norm. There's a particularly telling detail. The Boattail was intended to modernize the spirit of the original Riviera, but it ended up being so radically different that some dealerships didn't even know how to present it. It had no clear audience. It wasn't purely sporty, nor fully luxurious, nor conventionally elegant. It was a singular piece, one that every person interpreted differently. Ironically, that same ambiguity, which once hurt its sales, is now the reason collectors admire it so deeply. Over time, its silhouette shifted from confusing to captivating. In today's market, a well-preserved Riviera Boattail often exceeds $40,000, while fully restored examples can reach significantly higher prices. 1960 to 1969, Chevrolet Corvair Monza. While many manufacturers were betting on oversized bodies and excessive ornamentation, the Corvair Monza arrived as something different, modern, sophisticated, and unmistakably forward-thinking. It invited drivers to imagine winding roads, a more intimate driving style, and a break from the traditional American formula. Its most distinctive feature was its mechanical layout. Unlike most American cars, the Corvair used an air-cooled, rear-mounted flat-six engine, a configuration inspired directly by European sports cars. However, all of that charm was overshadowed by an event that permanently altered its trajectory. In 1965, Ralph Nader published Unsafe at Any Speed, a scathing critique of automotive safety that included a devastating chapter focused on the Corvair. Even though later studies showed that many of the claims were exaggerated or outright incorrect, the damage was already done. Public perception shifted overnight, and the reputation Chevrolet had spent years building collapsed instantly. The Corvair Monza wasn't defeated by engineering flaws. It was destroyed by the weight of a media storm it could not defend itself against. There's a detail that highlights just how unfair its fate truly was. In 1972, after multiple independent analyses, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration concluded that the first-generation Corvair was no more dangerous than any other contemporary vehicle. In other words, it had been the victim of a historical moment, one in which public fear and media influence outweighed facts. With its elegant design and unconventional engineering, the Monza became the perfect symbol of industrial injustice. In today's collector market, its value has steadily increased. A well-preserved example can exceed $20,000, and fully restored units often climb far higher. Before we move on, let me ask you something directly. Among the forgotten or unfairly judged cars of the 1960s, which one do you think deserved far more recognition than it received? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. 1971 to 74, AMC Javelin AMX. This was a car built to stand out, a statement from American Motors saying they had much more to offer in a market dominated by giants. And in terms of personality, the Javelin AMX had nothing to envy in its rivals. Its wide stance gave it a menacing look, and the versions equipped with V8 engines delivered an intense driving experience, the kind that demanded firm hands and ears tuned to the growl of the exhaust. AMC managed something rare, a car with presence, character, and just the right amount of irreverence, distinguishing it from more predictable models. The AMX didn't want to imitate. It wanted to define its own territory. But history tends to favor those with power, not necessarily those with talent. AMC lacked the financial resources, infrastructure, and advertising reach of Ford or Chevrolet. Even though the Javelin AMX had all the merits it needed, the company simply didn't have the corporate muscle required to stay competitive in a brutal market. AMC dealerships couldn't sustain massive marketing campaigns or offer attractive incentives, and the brand as a whole operated under constant economic pressure. That imbalance pushed the Javelin into an unfair corner where its quality was overshadowed by the noise of its competitors. There's one particularly interesting detail. The Javelin AMX became the official patrol car of the Alabama Highway Patrol and several other state police departments. Its ability to maintain high speeds for long periods, paired with its impressive stability, made it a trusted performance machine. But even that institutional respect wasn't enough to save it from a marketplace where visibility depended on million-dollar marketing budgets. Today, in the collector world, the Javelin AMX has finally earned the recognition it always deserved. A well-preserved example can exceed $40,000, while high-performance, meticulously restored versions can reach significantly higher numbers. 1971 to 75 de Tomaso Pantera. This was a car that felt international from the very first glance, a true symphony between two mechanical philosophies that, together, seemed destined for success. The story of its creation is as exciting as its presence. Ford, eager to compete with Europe's elite sports cars, saw in Alejandro de Tomaso a partner capable of producing an exotic machine with a powertrain simple enough for the American market. The Pantera embodied that ambition, a car with perfect proportions, sharp lines, carefully studied aerodynamics, and a personality that suggested motion even at a standstill. The idea was brilliant. The Pantera was meant to be Ford's secret weapon against Ferrari, Maserati, and Lamborghini, a strategic strike proving that the United States could shine in the most exclusive arena of automotive design. But reality was far less forgiving. Despite its stunning design, the early build quality fell dramatically short. Misaligned panels, unstable electrical systems, inadequate cooling, and rough finishing gave it a problematic reputation right from the beginning. Buyers who expected a refined European-style sports car instead found a machine that, despite its impressive power, demanded patience and tolerance. In a segment where perfection wasn't a luxury, but an expectation, this fragility deeply damaged its image. Then came an even harsher blow. By the mid-1970s, Ford decided to gradually abandon the project, pressured by economic tensions and the need to focus on more profitable models. Without corporate backing, the Pantera was left exposed, relying on a small, limited industrial base. Its power remained extraordinary, its design magnetic as ever, but commercially, it was left vulnerable. Today, the Pantera is a collector's icon, appreciated by those who understand that its personality blends beauty, power, and a history full of highs and lows. A well-preserved example easily exceeds $120,000, and restored units or special spec models can sell for much more. 1970 to 1974. Plymouth Barracuda. This is one of those cars that delivers an immediate, almost visceral impact the moment it appears before you. The 1970 and 1971 versions in particular are considered by many enthusiasts to be among the most beautiful shapes ever created in the world of muscle cars. But the Barracuda entered the market late, and that delay cost it dearly. Ford and Chevrolet had already secured an iron grip on the pony car segment with the Mustang and Camaro, models that had spent years capturing America's imagination. When the new Barracuda finally arrived, no matter how seductive it was, the battlefield was already occupied. Plymouth had built an exceptional car, but they did it too late to compete on equal footing. And then came a devastating blow, the 1973 oil crisis. Almost overnight, muscle cars transformed from symbols of freedom into vehicles seen as financially irresponsible. Rising fuel prices, new regulations, and a cultural shift toward efficiency suffocated the entire segment. Even though the Barracuda's lines looked destined for eternity, the market turned its back. Sales fell, brochures thinned out, and little by little, a car that deserved to shine faded away before it could prove its full potential. There's one especially revealing detail that illustrates the injustice. The versions equipped with legendary engines like the 426 Hemi or the 446 pack were machines capable of truly absurd performance. Their acceleration, their sound, and their breathtaking straight-line behavior made them living challenges to anything on the road. And yet, even these exceptional versions could not escape the economic and cultural tidal wave that rewrote the destiny of an entire generation of cars. Today, the Barracuda has regained the prestige it should have had all along. A solid example can exceed $90,000, and the rarest, highest performance models often climb beyond $200,000. Before we move on to the next model, let me ask you something very directly. Among all the forgotten or underestimated cars of the 1970s, which one do you believe deserved a completely different fate? I'd love to see your answer in the comments. 1981 to 83. DeLorean DMC-12. Its sharp, futuristic lines, stainless steel body panels, and iconic gull-wing doors created a visual presence that looked closer to an experimental aircraft than a conventional automobile. It was conceived not just as a car, but as a symbol, an audacious statement about what the future of motoring should look like. Yet the real story of the DMC-12 was filled with obstacles, missteps, and disappointments that doomed it commercially long before Hollywood turned it into a cultural legend. The idea behind the DMC-12 was born from John DeLorean's dream, a visionary determined to break away from Detroit's norms. His goal was to create a car that was safe, durable, different from anything on the road, and capable of redefining the relationship between manufacturer and consumer. Giorgetto Giugiaro's design elevated that ambition to an extraordinary level. Low proportions, bare metal surfaces without a drop of paint, and a stance that suggested speed even at rest. But while the exterior promised perfection, the reality underneath was much more complicated. The PRV V6 engine, developed jointly by Peugeot, Renault, and Volvo, delivered disappointing performance for a sports car, and the first production batches suffered from assembly flaws, electrical issues, and poor fit and finish. The contrast between how it looked and how it drove severely damaged its reputation. And then came the price. The DMC-12 cost more than many well-established sports cars that offered far better performance. The company, pressured by rising manufacturing costs and a struggling economy, faced mounting financial issues. When the factory in Northern Ireland began to falter, quality problems multiplied, feeding a reputation the brand could no longer escape. In just 2 years, a project meant to crown DeLorean's vision collapsed entirely. Today, the DMC-12 enjoys a second life. Well-preserved examples regularly exceed $60,000, and meticulously restored units can go much higher. And with that, we reach the end of our journey through some of the most beautiful, daring, and unfairly forgotten American classics of their era. Cars with personality, design, and soul. Machines that had everything to succeed, yet were pushed aside by bad timing, difficult economic contexts, or simply the whims of the market. Now, I want to ask you something important. Your opinion helps keep the memory of these legendary machines alive. Which of these models do you think was treated the most unfairly? Which one would you bring back today if you could? Your comment doesn't just enrich the video, it helps this community of classic car enthusiasts grow and stay connected. And before you go, I invite you to continue this journey with another video I know you'll enjoy. Our deep dive into the most beautiful cars of the 1970s. Click now, you're going to be amazed. See you there.